Yeah, there's something unique about, and it shouldn't be unique, but there's something unique about having economic self-determination. So you think about in this country, there are a number of groups of people who historically haven't had economic self-determination, either because they were literally, traded as property and forced to do certain jobs that they weren't compensated for, that they literally had no choice in what to do when they woke up in the morning, to people that were shut out of certain industries because they were women or because they were Native American or because they were, Asian American or Pacific Islander. People have been shut out or haven't had the opportunity to have that economic self-determination. And the problem with that, both personally, but also when you think about the broader economy, is there's a principle called economic dynamism. And I started my career working on Capitol Hill, so I'm not going to get too nerdy, but I have the propensity to go there. So stop me if I go too far down the road.
You're good, man. You're good.
But there's a principle called economic dynamism, and it speaks to the elasticity of an economy. So just like a rubber band, the economy should be able to grow and expand or contract in response to whatever the economic realities are of the day. And so if you have an economy where people don't have the economic self-determination, they don't have the opportunity to be able to start new enterprises, to get those new enterprises funded, to hire other people and to grow those enterprises, what you have is like a rubber band that you put into the freezer. You put it into the freezer and it can't expand. It's trying to grow, but it can't expand because all of the capital is locked up. All of the capital is stuck in these big companies or these big industries or these certain segments of the population that have been given access, that have been given the opportunity to grow businesses. And when that happens, just like if you put a rubber band in the freezer and you try to stretch it, it's going to tear, and then if you aren't careful, it's going to break. And so I think we've seen these breakages in the economy, both in the U.S., we might call them, dislocations in the economy here, but we see them also globally. There's a lot of countries because of colonialism, because of other countries trying to take over the years, haven't had the opportunity to have that economic self-determination either. And similarly, on a global scale, you see these dislocations. You see people not being able to reach their full potential, not because, to the point that you made, Jeremiah, the potential isn't there, but just because other folks want to, take over and do it for them, and it just never works.
We created this podcast with the idea that we were going to create a platform that would help entrepreneurs who maybe come from non-traditional backgrounds, help them get more exposure to their brand, their business, their mission. And so it's been a great ride.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Underestimated Podcast. My name is Rodell Razor. I'm the CEO of X Factor Capital. I'm joined here today with my good friend and business partner, Jeremiah Captain. And today we have an amazing show. We're excited about our guests, what we have to share with you. But before we get rolling, we just love to thank our sponsors who make all of this possible. Thank you to all of our viewers who are tuning into the show. So welcome to Season 2 of the Underestimated Podcast.
Yes, I'm Jeremiah Captain, Vice President of X Factor Capital, and really our whole, raison d'etre, our purpose is to find, fund, and fuel Black entrepreneurs and help them grow and scale their businesses in the tech ecosystem. And I have the pleasure of bringing someone who's become a dear friend over the past 2 years, Brandon Andrews. We actually met in 2020. I had a friend that went to the CES event in Vegas, and she immediately hit me in my DM and said, "Oh my God, you gotta meet this brother. Like, you gotta connect with him. He's just so brilliant, so articulate." And I was like, "Why? Just because he's Black and smart, we need to meet?" And she said, "No, but exactly that's why we need to connect. Just because he's doing something dynamic in the tech ecosystem and just helping founders really grow in the diverse space." And I found out that Brandon actually is the casting consultant and really helping bring in diverse founders, especially Black Black founders into the Shark Tank ecosystem. And we just connected. I had a founder that was a woman that he was able to give some guidance on to help her understand how she could potentially grow her company to hit some metrics to potentially get on that show. And then when me and Rydell finally had just the courage and the vigor to go launch our firm, Brandon was one of the first people we reached out to and gave us a lot of value with connecting us with some dynamic, talented Black founders. So love to have Brandon Andrews come on board to our show and really just share a little bit about, just who you are, what do you do, and why do you do it. So Brandon, I'd love for you to take it away.
Yeah, well, hey guys, happy to be here, and congrats on one, launching the fund, but two, congrats on season 2. Love the content that you create. And, I want to start here because for me, this is what a lot of what I do comes down to. So you mentioned Shark Tank and doing casting. I cast for a number of TV business shows, but, for every one entrepreneur that I meet who has a business and wants to be on the show, I probably meet 5 or 6 aspiring entrepreneurs. So people that have an idea, that have a spark, and maybe have the grit to build a business, but who just haven't done it yet. And so what I want to do with anything that I'm touching, anything that I'm working on, is make sure that people, especially from communities of color, especially from folks from communities that have historically been underestimated, have the resources to not only have the idea, but to have the space to be able to build the business, to have the resources to be able to take that step and create something of value, and also have the resources to be able to grow whatever it is that they're working on. And so for me, whether it's the work that I do in the entertainment space, whether it's the investing that I do personally, whether it's working with other organizations, or even whether it's working on my own company. I'm Chief Product Officer, co-founder of Gauge, a market research platform. A lot of what I do is about ensuring that people who have that idea, who have that spark, have the resources to be able to actually take the step and create something of value that eventually is going to have a positive impact on the world that we all live in.
Wow. That's good, Brandon. And I think that, you mentioned all the different buckets that you're involved in, and ultimately it's to raise people up through entrepreneurship. And I think that that's something that we share through not just our mission and vision with X Factor Capital, and that's why when Jeremiah, when you guys connected, he was like, "Hey man, I met this guy who's casting on Shark Tank," and I was like, "How did you meet this guy?" And then we had a chance to meet you, and you're just incredibly humble and so generous with your time and your advice. And me and Jeremiah were coming from outside the industry, right? We were entrepreneurs ourselves, weren't in technology, weren't in venture, and you were like, "Hey guys, you have the right connections, but most of all, you just encouraged us and said, you guys can do this." And so 2 years later, we look back and we think about the people that planted early seeds of confidence into us. And Brandon, you were definitely one of those people. So while we have you captive right now, we want to give you your flowers and thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, thank you so much for taking that step and again, creating something. I always think about, I know all of us were athletes at different levels. In this conversation, I always think about what Arthur Ashe said. He said, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And I think whether you're an entrepreneur, you're an investor, whether you want to start a nonprofit, whatever space you're in, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. That's exactly what you all did with X Factor and now with this podcast. And of course, looking forward to seeing everything continue to grow with you.
Now, and you talk about just the whole entire ecosystem. We need all hands on deck. You need more diversity. We need more people that look like us or come from these underrepresented communities or underestimated communities, because hidden markets or frontier markets are being unlocked from people that come from these markets because they understand the problems that need to be solved there. As you talked about some of the earlier before we got on, you have some of these international travel that you're doing. You're seeing some of these communities that are finally having access to opportunities to actually use the resources in their country or their native land to go to the market and compete at a global scale. And it's so important because there's no such thing as a poor nation. There's no such thing as a poor community. There's been communities and nations that have been extracted from or taken advantage of, but the resources there are rich, right? The people are rich in hunger and want to learn and want to grow, but you need the entire ecosystem to develop, from the education that's going into those communities, not only just traditional education from a literacy standpoint, but the education to how to run a business properly. Obviously, the investors that come from that area that look like those people, or outside capital to come in and support them. Like as you said, the connection aspect, being able to have people on the entire journey, this roadmap of the journey of successful entrepreneurship. It's not just having an idea and just going to the market. You need multiple people in the equation to help you grow and scale out.
Yeah, there's something unique about, and it shouldn't be unique, but there's something unique about having economic self-determination. So you think about, in this country, there are a number of groups of people who historically haven't had economic self-determination, either because they were literally traded as property and forced to do certain jobs that they weren't compensated for, that they literally had no choice in what to do when they woke up in the morning, to people that were shut out of certain industries because they were women, or because they were Native American, or because they were, even Asian American or Pacific Islander. People have been shut out or haven't had the opportunity to have that economic self-determination. And the problem with that, both personally, but also when you think about the broader economy, is there's a principle called economic dynamism. And I started my career working on Capitol Hill, so I'm not going to get too nerdy, but I have the propensity to go there. So stop me if I go too far down the road.
You're good, man. You're good.
But there's a principle called economic dynamism, and it speaks to the elasticity of an economy. So just like a rubber band, the economy should be able to grow and expand or contract in response to whatever the economic realities are of the day. And so if you have an economy where people don't have the economic self-determination, they don't have the opportunity to be able to start new enterprises, to get those new enterprises funded, to hire other people and to grow those enterprises, what you have is like a rubber band that you put into the freezer. You put it into the freezer and it can't expand. It's trying to grow, but it can't expand because all of the capital is locked up. All of the capital is stuck in these big companies or these big industries or these certain segments of the population that have been given access, that have been given the opportunity to grow businesses. And when that happens, just like if you put a rubber band in the freezer and you try to stretch it, it's going to tear, and then if you aren't careful, it's going to break. And so I think we've seen these breakages in the economy, both in the U.S., we might call them, dislocations in the economy here, but we see them also globally. There's a lot of countries, because of colonialism, because of other countries trying to take over the years, haven't had the opportunity to have that economic self-determination either. And similarly, on a global scale, you see these dislocations. You see people not being able to reach their full potential, not because, to the point that you made, Jeremiah, the potential isn't there, but just because other folks want to, take over and do it for them, and it just never works.
Wow, that's that was a lesson in global economics for me. I really appreciate that. The would you say economic self-determination? I think that's a term that I've heard thrown around, but you illustrating that for us and exactly what that is. And obviously the work that we do representing the Black community here in the United States, but all underrepresented or underestimated entrepreneurs, people of color, and even women that have not had certain opportunities because of whether it's laws, the economic state of that country, or whatever it may be. And I think, when you broke that down, something that was coming up for me is like, okay, Brendan had this unique experience, like you said, working on Capitol Hill, and having an opportunity to learn how economies operate, and then you're out on the front lines because you're a co-founder, and you're also recruiting and meeting founders every single day. So
an investor as well.
An investor. So to see economies, what happens when economies are working well and not, but then also the disruptors of the economy, in the entrepreneurial space. So talk to us a little bit about your role at Gauge. You playing the entrepreneur rather than focusing on policy or even recruiting entrepreneurs. Talk to us about your role as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, at Gauge, I'm co-founder and chief product officer, and I'll take a quick step back and tell you a little bit more about how Gauge came to be. Gauge is a mobile market research platform. After spending some time working in government, left government, became an entrepreneur, started doing some consulting, and really benefited from having some pretty strong relationships with a lot of clients who were large companies. So whether they were, large entertainment companies or tech companies or consumer product companies, whatever, very often those execs would have myself and others who worked at our agency, Values Partnerships, kind of on speed dial. And they say, hey, Brandon, we are thinking about this hiring decision, or we're thinking about a new TV show and having this title for the show, or we're thinking about creating this new product or service, or running this new campaign. What do you think? I always appreciated having a seat at the table, but I don't speak for any entire community, Mm-hmm. And even if I am a skilled consultant, it is incredibly risky for a client to make a decision based off a singular point of data, in my opinion, no matter how good I think I am, no matter how much experience I think I have. And so when we saw that issue, that gap in the market, we decided to look at some of the traditional market research options and just found that the efficacy wasn't there. The decision cycle for our clients was very often in a matter of days, if not hours, and the process of putting together a traditional focus group or doing traditional market research was often measured in weeks, if not months. And once you got the data back, there's just a big difference between having a sheet or spreadsheet with numbers in it and actually having intelligence that you can use to inform an active decision-making process. And so that's what led us to start Gauge. Our MVP was super simple. We got a bunch of people that we thought would be good at sharing feedback onto an SMS text chain, literally just on a phone, SMS text chain, and wanted to answer two questions with the test. One, would these people be interested in sharing feedback? And two, would the feedback actually be helpful, again, to our clients or potential clients? We ran that test for about a month and checked both of those boxes. Not only did they enjoy sharing feedback, they really enjoyed being in a community with other people who they respected, who they thought were cool, whose names they maybe knew or whose handles that they knew from social media. That validated these people as experts, as influencers, as social leaders, as community leaders. And then also, the feedback that they shared was really helpful. In fact, during that month-long test, we actually took feedback and were able to change the title of a TV show based on the recommendation from that MVP. And again, MVP, we didn't spend any money. We had relationships. Again, thinking about Arthur Ashe, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. We had the relationships. We had a hunch. We put them together. It only cost us the manpower to put it together, to get the questions and kind of pull the data out and organize it, pitched it to a few clients. It resonated with them. And from there, after we got that validation, started building out Gauge. And so my role functionally is chief product officer. So I manage our dev team, do all of our back-end work, help with our product road mapping, and making sure that from a technical standpoint, that the product that we deliver works well for our members who are sharing their feedback via our platform, but also delivers for our clients who are taking that feedback in a confidential way and using it for their decision making. And so that's a little bit about Gauge. And hopefully for those of you, again, that may be listening that have an idea or have a hunch or have something, we all want to get more funding to entrepreneurs. Whenever I'm doing an event, wherever I'm doing it, whether it's in the US or globally, access to capital is always the number one question. We all want to get more funding there. However, don't let a lack of funding stop you from taking that first step. And that first step for us, again, didn't cost any money. It just took us putting together a list of what resources we actually had access to, tapping those resources in relationships, a cell phone, and a spreadsheet to be able to put questions and answers into, and then using that to validate the idea before we move forward with, with building something that would require more capital. So that's the Gage story, and that's what we do.
Well, it's the story of any entrepreneur, and I mean your time in government and all this opportunity you've seen with so many entrepreneurs is okay. You're in an industry, you see a problem, you have a level of expertise. So you're a subject matter expert in providing feedback to organizations, and then you got a thesis on how it should be solved. And I think that the entrepreneurs that I'm sure you consult, that we've met, most of them, it's a problem that they're dealing with within their industry, or at their workplace, or in their communities. It's a problem that they're very familiar with. They're not trying to go solve a problem that's foreign to them. It's like, oh, well, we had this problem where people wanted my opinion, and I thought, hey, they should have more opinions than just mine. And how do I scale that? How do I get more opinions on here? So, no, I appreciate you sharing that.
I tell people all the time, Bernell, just go through your week, write down all of the problems that you encounter in a week. Monday through Sunday, all the friction, and on Sunday, come up with a couple of ideas or a couple of solutions to each one of those things. And I guarantee you, out of that list of ideas you come up with, there'll be something that's worth you building a business around. Those are going to be things that you are uniquely qualified to solve because of your proximity to the problem. Your proximity is also going to give you a unique and authentic origin story about the business. And ultimately, you're just going to be best positioned and motivated because it's a problem that you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis and something that you'd like to improve in your life. At the end of the day, all of us are a little bit selfish, but if we channel that selfish energy to solving a problem, there are a lot of other people like us around the world. And so if we can solve a problem for ourselves, we can scale that and have a positive impact on a lot of people too.
Yeah, so good. I was actually thinking about that this morning when I was brushing my teeth. I was rushing out the house and needed to get to the shower before I got on the plane. I was like, wouldn't it be nice if we had showers at the airport? And I was just thinking about that. Anyone going to create that idea? But I don't know if they're creating showers at the airport, right? I had to kind of talk myself out of it.
There's one in Dallas.
Yeah, but hey, didn't know that, right? But just kind of creating a unique way where there's like a booth that you go in, shower in the American Express room, and you got to have the right type of slippers and all that so that people can keep it clean and towels and all that. But I was thinking about that, hey, going through your day and what do you see that's a problem for you? It's a friction point, and how can you create a business to go solve it? But you talked something about just creating those feedback loops very quickly for brands, because people are naturally, especially millennials and Generation Z, they're a little bit more open to share their experiences than the generations that came before us, right? So you see that with Black Twitter, right? Black Twitter puts a lot of information.
There's so much value in what people are sharing, but when you share it on Twitter, it kind of goes into the ether. You don't know if a brand is actually
getting it,
listen to it and be responsive to it. One, and then two, you're not being rewarded, because we believe in rewarding everyone who shares feedback on our platform, because that is that is valuable. We believe in that, but that doesn't happen just via social. So you're absolutely right there.
Yes, you're creating that intimate focus group, for people to get that feedback loop correctly back to the company so they can read that data, because, intuition, like we have heard, gets you to the mountain, but the data gets you up the mountain, right? Understand exactly what those key points are, so you're really aggregating that out.
And that data thing is so important because, you think about some of these campaigns over the past few years. The Pepsi Kylie Jenner one is probably still the one that comes to mind for people the most. But there were people in the room who said this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
But you've got to have the right combination of data
to back it up,
plus the diversity and inclusion. So you got to have somebody in the room that has that lived experience from a community. There's no substitute for that. Data can't fix that. So you got to do that. You got to make that commitment as a company. especially as an enterprise level organization. But on top of that, if by using a rapid research option like a gauge, we can also give you the data to reinforce the lived experience that you have, the experience as a internal subject matter expert, then you have both sides that are necessary to be able to push something forward or to stop something before it gets too far down the road and ends up becoming a big issue for whatever company or whatever organization you're working in. And so, yeah, the data is incredibly important. You got to have the people too, but if you but if you don't have the people, especially, you want to have the data to be able to help inform what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And and our clients like a Snap, Chat, like a Sephora, like a Procter and Gamble, Target, and others are using us to not only get the data when they have a new product or service or campaign, but they're using us to hopefully help build stronger relationships with the communities that we target, which is incredibly important as well.
Yeah, data without discernment can be very dangerous, right? Yeah. So having the right discernment in there, and like you said, and bringing the right information. We trust in God, we trust, but everybody else bring data, to the conversation. Yeah. You guys are doing that.
But that shower idea, man, I guarantee you, you would not have wanted to sit next to me on the plane when I was in, I think I told you, going to Tajikistan earlier this year to Dushanbe to speak at a tech conference called Go Viral. It's basically like a South by Southwest, but in Central Asia. Wow. And it takes 24 hours plus to get there. And so not every airport has a shower, or not every layover that you have is long enough to go to a hotel room and actually freshen up a little bit. And just doing the bird bath thing in the bathroom at the lounge or in the airplane itself, that refresh isn't as refreshing as you would like it to be. And so, yeah, man, I think there's a lot of people sitting on long haul flights that would appreciate it if the person who was sitting next to.
All right, praise Cowboys. So you're gonna be my angel investor. I got syndication.
I got to do a plug for a company that we're all familiar with. When they were on the show, it was Shower Pill. But Hustle Clean, they do solve that problem of the quick shower or the wipe. That allows your body to get fresh. We'll shout out to Hustle Clean. We'll send him this clip. He can use it for some marketing. But
I just saw. I didn't get to do his session, but I just saw he was at Black Tech Week in Cincinnati.
Yep.
Which this weekend it was really, really good. Yeah, I saw he did a couple of sessions. The Hustle Clean folks did. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, Justin's good people. So I know everybody is excited to hear about Shark Tank and the work you do on TV. Before we go into that, I want to ask, market-wise right now, where are the markets at? Everybody's talking about it, right? It's markets are down, investing is down, all these things are, inflation is through the roof at the time of this recording, which is late July of 22. So talk to us a little bit about how that impacts the communities that you're serving, both, like you said, the State Department globally, and then what you're noticing within the Black and brown communities and underserved communities here in the U.S.
Yeah, well, the State Department has their foreign service officers, but a lot of people actually don't know the Department of Commerce actually has the Foreign Commercial Service. So it's just like being a foreign service officer through the State Department, except you only focus on economic items. You only focus on the local economy, the global economy, connecting the U.S. economy to the economy in whatever country that you're stationed in. And so those folks are always thinking about, one, how are these economic changes impacting the region that I'm in, but also how would this impact any foreign investment, whether that's U.S. dollars, going to the area they're in, or their currency going back to the U.S. And so it's always the planning process for those folks is really understanding locally the durability of their economy and whether or not I guess doing things to be able to shore up the opportunity, the potential investment opportunity for U.S. investors. As I think about U.S. businesses, though, and I actually was just having these conversations. I did some office hours with entrepreneurs at Black Tech Week and had this exact conversation. A Black entrepreneur has a CPG company, a toy business, basically, and to be able to take advantage of the seasonal nature of that kind of business. So thinking about the holidays. You have to put the orders in. And in fact, for some people, it's even late now to be putting the orders in. If you put them in July.
Supply chain issues.
Yeah. So one, they're coming off of the pandemic where there was this significant constriction when it came to supply chains and access, and significant increase in and how much it cost to ship things to get a container. Those things increased significantly. Now, earlier this year, think about fourth quarter last year, first quarter this year, those costs started to rebalance, even though inflation more generally has been up. Some of those costs, from a logistics standpoint, have started to rebalance a little bit. But now, with this next kind of wave potential of downturn, or even with a downturn when it comes to consumer sentiment, they're thinking, okay, the cost just came down. I wanted to take full advantage of this by, doing a significant purchase for the holiday season. But now folks are telling me that maybe that's not a good idea. And so that's a real life issue to have to kind of tangle with. I think a couple of things. One, nothing yet has shown that consumer spending has taken a significant nosedive. And so that doesn't mean it won't happen as we look at the holiday season or even going into first quarter of 23. However, consumer spending has remained pretty consistent. The question, though, is how much of that is still having some money from the checks that folks got during the pandemic. How much of it is people just spending consistently, but the prices are higher, but maybe not buying more, but still spending the same just because the prices are higher. So there's some questions there, but that consumer spending is still happening. And it's interesting because you have Macy's that is bringing back Toys R Us. Toys R Us went with the way of the dinosaur. I'm about to say with the way of the giraffe, went the way of the dinosaur of years ago. But Macy's is bringing them back as like pop-ups within Macy's stores and planning to launch this fall. And I know all of those folks are thinking, okay, we can't bring this thing back just to have it, go away again if the economy isn't where we want it to be. That consumer spending, I think, is in consumer sentiment and consumer spending are really what to look at from an entrepreneur perspective. If you're thinking about, if you have a retail purchase order and you're thinking about, okay, how do we fulfill this? Sometimes there are buybacks involved when you have a retail agreement, which means as an entrepreneur, you're responsible for purchasing at least in part items that don't sell through, whether that is in a retail store or even online, and making sure that you have the financing to cover that is important. Or if you're thinking about just from a surplus order standpoint, how much can I have on hand? And if you do have product on hand, the question is, from a tax standpoint, can you write it off? Because just because you have the surplus inventory there, as a CPG company or as any company that's selling, particular products as actually hard items, you do have the opportunity from a tax standpoint, if you look at it early enough, to potentially write off some of that. So even if you don't have the same kind of response from consumers when it comes to holiday season, you'll have an opportunity to recoup some of those costs with taxes. But the last thing, and just back to politics for a little bit, if there is a significant downturn when it comes to economy, there's going to be a conversation about one, doing something to directly support small businesses, or doing something else to spark consumer spending, given any downturn that may be there. Now, the other piece to that is a lot of people point to the checks that folks got during the pandemic as a cause of inflation. And so I'm sure that conversation will happen. However, I can't imagine if there is some kind of downturn, there not being some significant proposals and a national conversation about economic relief for small businesses and potentially something to spark consumer spending by the end of the year, if we do end up seeing some of the more negative of the predictions that are out there.
Yeah. And you spoke a lot about kind of the CPG space. We understand typically underrepresented founders, underestimated founders, Black founders. That is a space that we've kind of been able to reign supreme in, outside of building wealth through entertainment and also real estate. But typically we go into those products because we understand marketing pretty well, and we can get into those. The barrier of entry of getting into that space is a little bit easier sometimes because we don't come through having a tech background, understanding software, or understanding SaaS, or building a data company that you're doing. Obviously, you're breaking the mold and putting more Black faces in there. But typically, we kind of reign supreme in that CPG space. Is that something you see pretty common?
Yeah, well, if you look at the data again, during the pandemic, there were 2.8 million more micro businesses, so businesses that have a website and are selling online. 2.8 million more of those businesses were started in 2020 than were started in 2019. Wow. And if you look at the breakdown, you look at the data, of course, you had Black entrepreneurs over-indexing, you had Latinx entrepreneurs over-indexing, you had women over-indexing, you had even Native entrepreneurs over-indexing when it comes to that new business formation. And most of those companies are selling some kind of product or service online. And so there's two things here, Jeremiah and Rodell, and something to think about as an investor. It's one, okay, how do these potential economic headwinds impact those new businesses that have been formed? But it's also, should we have capital that focuses on taking those micro businesses, maybe not putting them on a venture track, but making those micro businesses sustainable? Is there an investing model to do that versus the normal model of kind of being on a venture track and trying to build a rocket ship? There's certainly, again, value in building these rocket ships and having unicorn companies, and we certainly want to see more unicorn companies that were founded by people of color. However, if you think about the kinds of businesses, to your point, Jeremiah, that folks from communities of color are starting, these CPG businesses, micro businesses, as they might be described in economic terms, that have the website and are selling some kind of good or service online, how do we ensure that they are properly capitalized so that they're sustainable over time, with the understanding that while a couple of those businesses may end up scaling and growing, a lot of them are going to be a side hustle, or they're going to be, if anything, I don't want to say just, but if anything, they'll be more of a lifestyle business, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
100%.
But from a broader economic standpoint, how can we support them? And so that's something that I think about, both for my personal investing, but also as I connect with other people. Something that I'm doing here in the fall is I'm working with the Clinton Foundation. They're actually bringing back their Clinton Global Initiative, which is the big annual meeting for the Clinton Foundation. And there's always been entrepreneurs and mission-driven businesses there, but for the first time, they're having a dedicated entrepreneurship track of programming at CGI. And one of the focus areas is inclusive economic growth. And so something I'm going to be thinking about is how can we have a conversation about micro businesses, who's starting those businesses, and what the gaps are between where those businesses are, what their needs are, and where capital currently is and where investors are currently looking. I think there's a gap there that, and if we bridge it, we'll certainly all be in a better place, not just the entrepreneurs themselves, when we think about, again, the broader economy and the positive impact that small businesses have on it.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of feedback. But one of the things I'm listening and I'm inspired by what you said, the creative funding vehicles that can be generated to support these businesses, whether they be micro businesses and side hustles, or whether they have an aspiration to be family businesses or lifestyle businesses that are generating significant revenue, creating a great lifestyle for the entrepreneur and their teams. But maybe are not venture track where they want to be global, but they could be regional or national companies that are still very successful. And that's what you see a lot of as we transition, as you're casting for Shark Tank and other TV shows, but Shark Tank being the headliner that we're very familiar with. So share a little bit about the work that you're doing, beyond Shark Tank, but also specifically how you got to being a casting representative for that show that has gotten a lot of entrepreneurial buzz. I think every entrepreneur, it's in our top 5 of favorite shows. We love watching it. It's inspired my venture journey. Shark Tank has a special place in my heart. I think I told you this when we met the first time. In my first entrepreneurial journey, which was about 10, 12 years ago, there was a show that came out. I was fresh out of college, and I was watching a show called Shark Tank. And I remember seeing Damon John, and I think at the time it was Mark was really the only face that was super recognizable by everyone. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I would love to be where Mark is sitting. I would love to be where Damon is sitting. I would love to be an investor one day. As much as I was inspired by entrepreneurship, I just didn't have the visibility. I didn't understand what they were doing. And so talk to us about your Shark Tank journey and what you do for television shows as casting different talents.
Yeah, I think entertainment, television, for the purposes of this conversation, not only has the ability to entertain and educate, but it has the ability to inspire people to do things. That can be positive, it can be negative, but hopefully for Shark Tank, in starting a new business, it's inspiring people to do something positive, to take that step out on faith and to build something that can be valuable, not only for the business owner, but for the people that are benefiting from the products and services that they make. I think about my own life. I grew up in a small town in South Alabama. My grandmother raised me there, and I had heard of being a business person, but I didn't know what business people did or how to become one, and I certainly hadn't wrapped my mind around being an entrepreneur, so owning my own business. And so something I love about Shark Tank and business shows more generally is that Shark Tank really opened up a window into a world that people would just have no reason to have a reference point to. You just have no reason to know anything about it, not only because not everybody's starting a business, but also because of the accredited investor definition in the United States, which limits, literally legally, stops people from investing money in companies pre-IPO, so before they're listed on some kind of public exchange, unless they meet certain either income or wealth requirements, basically 200K as a single person, or having $1 million net worth, not including your primary residence, which is where most people carry, a lot of their net worth in terms of value. And so it really opened up a window into a world that people wouldn't know anything about. And so I love that about the show. But the flip side of that is it only focuses on kind of equity investments. Every once in a while you have Mr. Wonderful do a different kind of deal, revenue share or something like that, which is great. But there's so many other kinds of ways to fund a business, and it's always my hope that we not only get more equity investment to women and to people of color, but we also ensure that people are getting the kind of funding that's best suited for their business today and best suited for what they want to do with their business in the future. But to take a quick step back and tell you the story. So worked on Capitol Hill, left, became an entrepreneur, had a previous mobile app company called Skill Target, and a buddy of mine, we had met when we were both working on Capitol Hill. He went to the White House and ran President Obama's Office of Faith and Neighborhood Partnerships, Joshua Dubois, during the first term. He did a screening for Mark Burnett when he was at the White House. When he left government, started doing some consulting for Mark. And so Joshua invites me to come to a screening for one of Mark Burnett, who's the producer of Shark Tank, one of his other projects. And while there, we just had a conversation with Mark. Joshua T. Levy said, "Hey, you've done some work with me. Brandon has some experience as an entrepreneur. Do you need help with the show?" Mark said yes, and it started out as just putting together spreadsheets, so just deal flow like any angel investing group or VC would do, but quickly grew into pre-pandemic a nationwide casting tour where I would plan and execute 10 or so casting calls all around the country and focus on finding diversity. So making sure that the diversity in the audience watching at home is reflected in the entrepreneurs who we had pitching on the show, which I love doing it. I meet several thousand entrepreneurs every year. During the pandemic, of course, we took everything virtual. And in fact, Shark Tank never shut down. It actually created a bubble, just like the NBA in Vegas at the Venetian Hotel. And
wow. I didn't know that.
During the pandemic, entrepreneurs, instead of going to LA to the Sony lot where it's usually filmed, it was all filmed at the Venetian in Las Vegas, and entrepreneurs had to come in and quarantine. So basically be stuck in a hotel for about a week to quarantine, and then they do the show, and then they, based on what state they were going back to, they had to maybe quarantine, before they could go back to. So it was a significant commitment, but we never shut down, and entrepreneurs were super excited about being involved. In addition to Shark Tank, I work on a range of other shows, some of the shows on CNBC, Bet on Black, which is a pitch competition on Revolt, which I'm really proud of and really happy because, we saw all of these commitments happen over the past couple of years after the murder of George Floyd. A lot of these companies made commitments to doing this and that. And Sean Combs, who, of course, is the founder, CEO of Revolt, he said, not enough ad dollars, not enough work is going to Black media. And there were a number of articles about him, and he was speaking out and having meetings, etc. Target responded to that, and Target said, "Okay, we made this commitment. Sean Combs is out here talking about the need for more support in this area. Let's see if we can't put something together." And so Target came in as an initial supporter of the concept of Bet on Black, which again is a pitch competition where we had Black entrepreneurs pitching to a panel of judges, people like T-Pain, DJ Envy, for non-dilutive capital. And that was on Revolt for season 1, and looking forward to hopefully bringing that back again too. So I love meeting the entrepreneurs, hearing their stories, hopefully being helpful to them even if they don't move forward with casting for whatever show I might be working on. I always hope that they leave the process or leave an engagement with me better than they came, because again, as an entrepreneur myself, I understand what it means to pitch a business, and I understand how much effort it takes to build something, and also the fact that they could always be doing something else with that time that they might be spending with us doing casting, even if it's virtual. So that's a little bit about the casting story and what we do.
Yeah, no, I'm so inspired by that, Brandon, and what the work you do with Bet on Black and with Shark Tank. I think like you said, the representation, and there was a time where I was running around making a claim that I was going to replace Damon John as the Black investor on the panel.
For it, man.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm putting in a word for me. No, I do appreciate the inspiration that show has played for many entrepreneurs. Especially, like you said, it's giving a window into the business world that so many are thirsting for. So many people are really desiring. And so it's really cool. And I would love for you to, I know we're about to wrap up here, but I would love for you to talk a little bit more. So you talked about Bet on Black and Diddy's role in that. and then how Target then responded. I want to frame this the right way. What do you see is the role of celebrity in the Black equity conversation? Because sometimes we look to them to be experts, and they can't be experts in everything. They're experts in their field, but they end up getting, plated with policy, business, justice issues. I mean, what do you see as their role as a community? Many of them are famous for what they do in entertainment, whether it's sports or entertainment, and then they're being plated with some of these issues that are not in their realm of expertise, but they're our community leaders in a lot of way. And so, what do you see are some of the challenges with that, and what do you see as their role?
Yeah, well, I think anyone that has a public profile, and you can argue that all of us have public profiles given social media and the fact and how ubiquitous accounts are. But anybody that has a public profile has a responsibility to make sure that they are sharing information that is accurate, at a minimum. And so I think about Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. Make sure that whatever it is you're sharing about whatever issue, that it is well informed, that it's factual, and that you can, maybe a year later look back and be proud of whatever it is that you shared about whatever the topic of conversation may be from a community standpoint. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, Rodell, you're absolutely right. We have a lot of celebrities, entertainers, athletes, etc., who people look to for not just entertainment, but they look to them for advice. They look to them as mentors. They look to them as something to aspire to be. And you're absolutely right. They're not experts in everything. However, their resources, their relationships give them access to the people that are experts. And so you can put together a team and respond substantively to something if you want to do that. And so I think it's completely fine for someone to say, hey, that's not my area of expertise, but here's someone else that I look to in that space, or here's a book or something, here's some kind of resource. But if you're going to speak authoritatively about something, you have access to the experts and to the people that make sense to connect with. And so use those resources, use those relationships to make those connections and have an informed opinion whenever you make it. I think I love seeing folks that are from the arts, entertainment, athletics, engaging in the global public square, engaging in public dialogue on issues. No one's always going to agree with everybody else on everything, and quite frankly, friction is required for progress, and so there's nothing wrong with having some dissenting opinions as long as they're well informed. But I think not being engaged at all isn't something that works just because of the amount of support that folks in entertainment, in athletics get from fans. Whether those fans are black or white or whatever, you're getting support from these people that are being affected by issues. You have an opportunity to say or do something that can have a positive impact. You can choose what to say or do, whether that's investing in companies from the community or whether that is taking a public stance on whatever issue. However, I definitely do think being engaged is the right way, and you do have access, again, to those resources to be able to get informed and make sure that you're proud of whatever it is that you're posting and sharing.
Yeah, Brandon, I appreciate it. And, as we wrap up here, man, I just thank you for the work that you're doing. Again, I think it's really cool to have the opportunity to interview someone who has such proximity to not only global issues, but very much the intimate issues of our community. Very rare sphere of influence that you have. Before we wrap up, Brandon, is there anything you'd like to share that's on your heart with our audience?
Yeah, I guess one thing, if you're interested in Shark Tank or interested in having me take a look at what you're working on, if you want to present what you're doing on TV, you can always go to sharkpitches.biz and do that. If you're interested in Gauge and want to learn more about either sharing your feedback with brands to have a positive impact, or want to learn if you're a brand about connecting with targeted communities, you can always go to gauge.ai for that. The last thing, I'll kind of end where I started. I'm proud of both of you. Love what you're doing, again, with the fund and also with the podcast. Can't wait to see it continue to grow. And back to Arthur Ashe, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can, and it can take you to places that you may never have been able to dream of before.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you, Brandon, and thank you for all of our listeners out there. We want to thank everyone who tuned into our podcast. We'll make sure that in this feed, wherever you find it, whether it's on YouTube or whatever podcast streaming platform, I'll make sure to put all those links, Brandon, that you mentioned for Shark Tank and for Gauge. I'll make sure to put those in the comments. And for all of our audience members, thank you again for watching the Underestimated podcast. Thank you to our sponsors again for all the work that you allow us to do through your support. So thank you guys. Take care.
Appreciate you, dude.
Okay.